Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts about the 40K universe. I am your host Gershwin and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about Space Marine chapters as we get into the Lamenters. If you guys have any suggestions for Space Marine legions that you guys would like to hear about, please comment down below. Don't forget to put suggestion followed by the Space Marine chapter that you would like us to talk about. Try to give me some first founding chapters. You guys did a really good job of giving me a bunch of second founding and all the other founding chapters. Give me some first founding chapters if you can. Let's get into 40 facts about the Lamenters. The Lamenters are an unfortunate loyalist chapter of the Space Marines, who perhaps more than any other chapter of the present era, seem to have been cursed by a dark shadow that has long determined their fate. The Lamenters were raised during the cursed 21st founding of the Space Marine chapters, in the 36th millennium. The matter of the curse pertaining to the exact nature of this founding has long since become shrouded in secrecy and myth. Many consider those chapters created under this label of the cursed founding as tainted from their very creation. The Lamenters are believed to have been created from the Blood Angel's gene seed, genetically modified by the Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests on Mars, to remove the effect of the Blood Angel's flaw, known as the Black Rage and Red Thirst. The Astartes of the Lamenters chapter are noted to suffer from a kind of mental melancholy, although it is unclear if this is due to some unexpected flaw in their gene seed, or if this is simply the result of the unfortunate events that have repeatedly befallen the chapter. Although the chapter is made up of those few Astartes descended from Sanguinius to be spared from the Red Thirst, the mark of that flaw was still upon the Lamenters in the eyes of their fellow Space Marines, many of whom chose to shun the chapter, regardless of their undoubtable loyalty to the Emperor of Mankind and his Imperium. During the early 37th millennium, matters worsened for the Imperium as corrupted Astartes of the 21st founding and other descendant forces rose up against the rule of the Emperor in a series of bloody wars and purges. The Lamenters chose to depart to the Imperium's fringes, rather than risk conflict with their fellow Astartes of the 21st founding. They used their mobility as a fleet-based chapter to crusade against the enemies without, rather than become ensnarled in the quagmire of civil conflict within the Imperium. For the next millennium and a half, the Lamenters would remain on a continuous crusade, conducting many campaigns against the various Xeno races that plagued mankind across the western reach of the galaxy. Often the chapter was recorded as intervening to aid isolated Imperial worlds under threat. Despite their record of honorable victories and valiant defenses of the Imperium's far-flung domains, the specter of misfortune seemed to dog them at every turn. Dark rumors began to grow and surround them as time and again the chapter suffered from bitter reversals and dark turns of fate. Even when they were recalled into the interior of the Imperium, along with a number of other crusading chapters by the High Lords of Terra, to help deal with the rising threat of incursion from the Eye of Terror, many Imperial commanders and other Space Marine chapters continued to view them with suspicion. The Lamenters' reputation often worked against them, but rarely with such consequences as during the Chaos attack on the high world of Corellia. During the Ninth Black Crusade, the superstitious-bound Mortifactors chapter refused to fight alongside the Lamenters, abandoning the planet rather than serving beside them. The Lamenters were unwilling to desert the Corellian population, holding out alone against the warbands of the Black Legion for 6 weeks, suffering horrendous losses until the Ultramarines and White Scars led a battle group that broke through the Chaos Warfleet's blockade to relieve Corellia. The Lamenters chapter had been reduced to barely 200 surviving Astartes by the time they were relieved by their fellow Space Marines. The Lamenters were deemed lost when their fleet disappeared into a warp storm soon afterwards, only to reappear more than a century later on the edge of the Segmentum Solar, having slowly battled their way back from the outer void. Once again, the Lamenters returned to full strength after slowly rebuilding their fleet and chapter ranks. They now operated as a crusade force near the galactic core, and were soon requested by the High Lords of Terra to form part of the defenses of a sorely pressed Maelstrom zone, as one of the chapters that served as a Maelstrom wardens. Their duties were to patrol the wide expanse of the desolate wastes of the Maelstrom's western zones, responding to and neutralizing chaotic and piratical threats as they were encountered, a duty the chapter took with great fervor. During this time, the Lamenters became close allies with the Astro Claws, who had the strategic command of the Maelstrom Zone, and fought alongside them in many of their greatest battles. The Astro Claws chapter, under its last chapter master, Huron, offered the Lamenters a degree of honor and respect they seldom received before from their fellow Astartes, as well as war materials with which to build and maintain the chapter's strength. It would be this friendship the Lamenters were so unaccustomed to, and the ties of blood split in battle alongside the Astro Claws, that would ultimately prove to be the chapter's undoing. The power armor of the Lamenters was originally bright yellow except for a red helmet stripe and the right shoulder plate, which was decorated with white and black checks, upon which rested the chapter's badge, a bleeding heart. The most recent chapter colors included a Mark VII Aquila pattern power armor scheme that darkens the Lamenter's armor to a mustard yellow, and transferred the chapter badge, the check pattern, to the left shoulder plate. The helmet stripe was dropped completely. The Lamenter's chapter badge is a bleeding heart against the background of a black and white checkerboard pattern. It appears that the Lamenter's gene seed may have been tampered with during its creation process by the Adeptus Mechanicus. The full extent of the modification performed during its creation on Mars was likely kept concealed even from the High Lords of Terra and other Adeptus Astartes chapter masters of that day, a theory easily given weight by the political turmoil and division that was rife throughout the Imperium during that time. It is also likely that the experimental procedures performed on the Lamenter's gene seed during its creation were done with at least their successor chapter tactical approval, for the Blood Angels have long sought an answer to their dual afflictions of the Red Thirst and the Black Rage. The goal of reducing the effect of the flaw were partially successful, and those records that remain concerning the 21st founding indicate that the numbers of Lamenters chapter Astartes succumbing to the Red Thirst over the centuries have been very small. It was quickly noted that certain idiosyncrasies of the mind and temperament developed within the Lamenters, factors that only grew more pronounced as the years passed. A dark melancholy seemed to take hold of the chapter's soul, and it was said amongst their fellow scions of Sanguinius that the Lamenters bore the grief of their Primarch's death more nearly than any other Blood Angel successor chapter. Whatever the truth of this ill fortune had already begun to follow the Lamenters like an unwanted shadow. As the years passed, there had been a continued and observable increase both in the Lamenters prone for melancholy and in the frequency which with the Red Thirst affects Lamenters Astartes. By some reports, the Blood Angel's flaws have been worsening to varying degrees in all Blood Angel successor chapters. It remains to be seen whether the Lamenters will survive long enough to see this and to begin recruiting new neophytes to replace their steep losses to High Fleet Kraken. The Lamenters remain at their heart a Blood Angel successor chapter, heir to the glorious and unique martial traditions and brutally effective art of war practiced by the sons of Sanguinius. They adhere to the basic tenets of the Codex Astartes. Like all their fellow scions of Sanguinius, there is a very great deal of fluidity between the companies, and they very rarely fight in full cohesion, except the 10th Scout Company, whose members have yet to complete their training and become full Astartes. Chapter recruitment was also carried out on a practical basis, with likely aspirants brought forth from the feudal worlds and far-flung colonies from wherever the chapter's fleet roving course took it. The Lamenters' order of battle favored shock assault tactics, often delivered through a close air assault utilizing the chapter's Thunderhawk and Storm Raven gunships. In terms of operational equipment and insignia, the Lamenters lean more towards the standard use of the Space Marines than their Blood Angel forebearers and their fellow Blood Angel successor chapters, although it may be more of a matter of ease of resupply and maintenance for a fleet-based chapter with no home port that is forced to rely largely on its own artificers. Chapter does retain a few cherished examples of sanguinary relics, but aside from their large numbers of air units, heavy tanks such as Land Raiders and Battle Predators are less common within the Lamenters than any of the other Blood Angel successors, while suits of Terminator armor are particularly rare in the Lamenter Armory and are valued beyond price by the chapter. As with their forebearers, the Lamenters chaplains operate as a part of their overall chapter command, rather than subordinates to it in each company, as is the case with the Codex-compliant chapters. This enables the chaplains to watch over the growing problems of the Red Thirst in the chapter's ranks, while the Sanguinary Priesthood holds a particularly prominent role and is known by the Lamenters as the Calyx. It has often been observed that it is the Calyx that has had the greatest part in holding the chapter together through its many rituals and misfortunes, as the apothecaries of the Lamenters tend not only to the physical health of the chapter's Astartes, but also to the spiritual stigmata they bear. On the field, the Lamenters first became involved in the Aculus Crusade when the chapter provided an escort to the rogue trader Kazendus Lan, settling a 1,000-year honored debt to the dynasty. The 4 squads of the escort fought alongside the rogue trader's own vessel regiments for a decade, and undertook a number of highly effective boarding actions against the arch-enemy warships in the Outer Reach. In the 812th year of the 41st millennium, the vessel on which the Lamenters were traveling suffered a catastrophic drive failure during real space translation, forcing it to be abandoned on the outskirts of the Phalon's Lament system. Only a handful of Battle Brothers survived the accident. Learning of the tragedy and recognizing the survivors' limited application as a conventional force, Watch Commander Mordigale of the Death Watch sought them out and introduced their service into the Long Vigil. The bulk of the surviving Lamenters in the Jericho Reach have formed a single kill team under the Watch Captain Brand Mac Lyer of the Storm Warden chapter, while several more serve in the other cells alongside the Battle Brothers of the other chapters. The latest campaign the Lamenters have fought in was in the 993rd year of the 41st millennium. After the Lamenters engaged High Fleet Kraken, there was barely 3 companies worth of Battle Brothers surviving. The Red Hunters chapter suffered losses too, for the task force assigned to track the Lamenters on their century-long penitent crusade, by orders of the Senatorum Imperialis, also had to make a stand against the High Fleet. And those were 40 facts about the Lamenters. Thank you guys so much for commenting that chapter down below. Again, if you guys have any other chapters that you guys would like to hear about, please comment down below with suggestion followed by the chapter that you guys would like to hear about. This is not the end. There's more lore to the Lamenters. There's actually a lot more lore that we have to get into for the Lamenters, so there's going to be a part 2 and a part 3. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for liking. You're telling YouTube that you want more 40K content, and at the same time, you're encouraging us to keep putting out content by liking the video. So again, guys, thank you so much for being awesome. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.